morning, everyone. Welcome back to your favorite podcast and ours, the Why So Curious podcast.
Good morning.
Wait, what's Why So Curious podcast? What is it? What is it all about? Listen, we are here to help you feed your curiosity by listening to a podcast that will look under every rock and behind every curtain to uncover the truth that's been hidden by abuse and by trauma. The most satisfying revenge is living a life thriving where you are the author of your own story and not your abuser. So welcome back. I'm Liz.
And I'm Lisa.
And today is
Forward Moving Friday, and it is the last day of season 2. Can you believe that? We've already gone through 2 seasons.
I can't even believe
absolutely crazy to me. And I just kind of want to go back a little bit too as to, we talked a little bit about goals last week. And so I kind of wanted to make sure that people really understood why you and I decided to start this podcast. Mm-hmm. And it's really because we want to spread awareness. These are conversations that need to be had that a lot of people aren't having. And but then a lot of people are dealing with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do in spreading awareness is have really intentional conversations. Our conversations are not planned. We don't want a formula. We want things to be generative. We want something new to come out of a conversations because you and I learn even as we have conversations with the audience. But it's also to come alongside listeners who really want to thrive, not just survive, right? Mm-hmm. We've talked about that. We've talked about the thriving life and that being the best revenge. And we also just want to remind everybody that we share vulnerable stories. And I just realized I have my gum in my mouth.
That's awesome.
Take out my gum. I don't want her to smell my coffee breath, okay? So anyway, we just want to share insight with each other, and we want to learn from each other. And so that is what this whole podcast is all about. So Forward Moving Friday is not any different because the question that we like to ask is, do you remember the future? Mm-hmm. And that's one of those weird questions because it's like, how do you remember the future? So I learned this concept from Dr. Curt Thompson, who I've shared with you guys before, but I think it's such a powerful question to ask yourself, right? And so we do remember our future, but a lot of us don't realize that that's what's happening in our everyday life. And a lot of us don't feel like we're moving forward because we could potentially be stuck in the past, whether it's past abuse, whether it's past trauma. Well, trauma and abuse go hand in hand. But the point is, we want to help you get to moving forward again and help you identify, are you stuck in your trauma in the past? And then what does it take for you to start moving forward? Because a lot of times it's just a fresh perspective. It's just like, oh, that little thought. We've said that before. It's like, you mean that's it? Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, to go through, anytime there is an opportunity to address confusion, that's what we want to do. Because the truth is where you want to stand. Confusion is going to cause you to wonder if you're okay. So let's cut through the confusion. And today, I've got a word that we have got to cut through the confusion. The word is consent.
I love this word.
I love this word when it's used appropriately.
Correct.
And so, the question would be, and why are we talking about consent? Well, we're in the topic of relationships, right? Last time we talked about setting goals for relationships, giving yourself permission to set goals, first of all, right? Like, I can set goals for a relationship. I didn't even realize that I could do that, right? So the whole point is, when we are looking at the word consent, where does consent land in a relationship? So what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word consent?
Well, it's a strong word for me. It means a lot. In a relationship, whether professional or personal, it's permission. Mm-hmm. Has permission been asked and has permission been granted? Mm-hmm. Without consent, you cannot move forward. For me.
Yeah. And that's really the simplicity of the power of the word. Mm-hmm. And consent is absolutely necessary in the relationships that we are in with each other, whether it is personal, whether it is professional. But it's always relational, isn't it? It is always based on relationships. Mm-hmm. So let's define it. I'm just going to read something that I found on Google.
Okay.
So consent, permission for something to happen or agreement to do something.
See, that's why it works professionally and personally.
Right?
See, I was
Permission
right.
for something to happen or agreement. So then there's also, though, a big issue with consent and sex, because a lot of people would think of the did you consent? So that's the question. Did you consent? So we're going to cut through the confusion.
Up the bus.
Yep. Because I'm going to tell a little bit about me and how the word consent really negatively impacted me, how it is negatively impacting our kids because they're getting a message of confusion.
Absolutely.
And it is so scary when people in power or people in authority or people who are just abusers use the word consent against those that they are abusing. And it's an important conversation to have, because if you don't stand on the truth of what the definition of the word means, then there's a lot of confusion that comes in, and then abuse is continuing to happen and be perpetuated. So I'll give an example real quick. I love the fact, too, that if you think about the heart, the brain, and consent, it all has to go together, because there's emotions and then there's rational thinking that you have to apply to make consent a reality. Now, if you think about a child, their brain is still in major development mode, right? So the last part of their brain to develop is the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that really allows you to think rationally, to make a rational, conscious choice. The emotional part of our brain, including the sexual part of our brain, is fully functioning at birth. So our emotions, everything, this is in a healthy brain, obviously. But so for kids, their emotions are running high. Their cognitive thinking skills are not running in correlation to how their emotions are in charge. So teaching the concept of consent to a child is so important to attach to their emotions, that helps empower them to know what consent actually looks like and how to stay safe in that boundary of consent. But when we're talking littles who don't have a voice, they don't even know how to apply consent, right? So they just do what they're told. And that leads into my story. So what I found out about myself as I started doing lots of therapy to figure out, why do I keep acting this way? Why do I keep making these decisions? Why do I keep finding myself in abusive relationships? What's wrong with me? Well, I found out through just lots of help and just walking through a lot of different things. You've always heard that your survival technique is either fight, flight, or freeze.
Correct.
Well, I listened to a gentleman who helped me with my parent video series talk about this, and he actually added submit.
Pausing on that for a moment.
Yeah.
Submit. Which is not a word you would think of that would go with those words.
Right.
Tell us more.
So submit is a reaction to a situation to do what you're told, obey. So there's a difference between freezing and not having the ability to protect yourself. But then if your body says the only thing that you're going to do to get through the situation to survive is to do what you're told, that's what submit means.
I see.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, I was not resonating with fight, flight, or freeze my whole life, because I didn't fight for myself. I am a big time runner, but sometimes I couldn't run. I just couldn't figure out what it was. And when he said submit, that totally landed, because it helped me understand that it was my brain's way of saying, this is how you're going to survive. Yeah. And thank you, brain, for helping me survive. But the problem was the confusion that came from the word submit was, as a child, somehow that means I consented.
Yes.
And then think about the power that abusers have when it comes to that situation, if that is your survival technique.
I'll tell you what, this is kind of turning me on my head right now and making me look at situations and things in my life in such a fascinating way right now, where there may have been some guilt, which is, I'm imagining where we're going with this, that I literally just now, I can see it fly off like with wings. And that is huge, huge. I'm sorry, keep going.
No, it was that I had the same reaction. I was just like, somebody, I mean, talk about the power of defining words, right? Talk
Yeah.
about the power of understanding, how your body is naturally designed to protect itself. But then think about the freedom. That little girl did what she could to survive that situation. To disobey, to not do what she was told would have been the death of her.
Absolutely.
Right? So understanding that, and I would venture a guess that most of us can probably relate to that form of survival.
It'd be hard to find somebody who could honestly say they've never been in that situation.
Right. And then, so the word submit, again, you think about it in the workplace. You have a boss, and the overarching impression is you're in submission to that person. You do what you're told to get through the workday so that you get paid. And so if we can look at helping, now we add submit to consent, and don't even get me started because the word consent is being so manipulated.
It is.
And the predators and the powers that be are making it a very confusing piece of legislation even. When it comes to, like, the state of Arizona, the legal age of consent is 18. But I think maybe I said that wrong. The legal age of consent for people to be sexually active is 16 in the state of Arizona. And in the state of Arizona, when they realized that we had an issue of sex trafficking, and we had girls sitting in juvenile detention serving time for prostitution, what part of your brain says, hold on, why are girls serving time in juvenile detention for prostitution? They can't be a prostitute when they're a minor. They are a prostituted child. So the problem was people were not identifying them because they used the word consent.
Oh.
So she consented to it. She got in the car. She posted the ad. Or her pimp posted the ad, or her mom or her dad, because seriously, familial trafficking is a big problem. So we're going to talk about that in another podcast. But the word consent has got to be brought back to what it was originally meant to be. And then I'm personally a person who would vote for, since we know and science can prove that our prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until we're 25 to 30 years old, that means while you're still developing, it still is not your first choice to understand and apply logic to a situation.
Not at all.
And especially if your life is depending upon something, and to say, I don't consent, or no, or stop. But if you don't say those words, it's going to be used against you because somehow you did something to deserve it. Same thing goes back to submit, where somehow, and that shame sets in, where you're thinking, oh my gosh, well, I did what I was told, therefore, I must have consented to that. Talk about watching shame step in and destroy your identity. just destroy your self-worth, because now you're feeling, again, back to there's something wrong with me. And when those words are misused, and they're used as a way to abuse somebody and to maintain control over that person, it is devastating. It is absolutely devastating. So when it comes to consent, when it comes to where we're at in the world today, what I would really encourage all of us to think about, and again, if we have kids, if we have access to any child who is going to learn anything from us, let's be really clear as to what consent means, regardless of what the law says in your state, or regardless of whatever form of consent that you that's going to be thrown in your face, right? We think about so many stories that you hear where, it's male and female, especially in the college scene, that they don't want to report a rape because, well, I made the choice to go to the party.
Right.
And also that question, don't ever ask a person, why didn't you just leave? That's the wrong question to ask. That is definitely the wrong question to ask, because people don't leave because what they're trying to do is survive the
Survive.
situation. They don't know how else to survive. So I just really think it's important. I'm going to tell a quick story. Because when I think about, my question is, why are we, as I'm going to just say America, why is America so hell-bent on sexualizing kids? Why? That's my question. When it comes to the fact that most of our children are being introduced to sexually explicit content while they're gaming on a little kid's gaming app. The predators are using the apps that kids are supposed to feel safe on to insert sexual abuse, right? Why are we so hell-bent on this? What is going on? I mean, I have my own theory. I personally believe in good and evil, and I believe that there is evil out there. I believe that there is just, a child is just a beautiful representation of innocence, and for anybody who doesn't like that, they want to devour it. They want to destroy it. It's kind of like they want to own it, for lack of a better word. It's kind of like, somebody doesn't break into my house to go after my coffee table. They break into my house because there's something valuable. Yep. And I think children are valuable. And I think that evil is going after that valuable treasure. And that's our kids. And that's why I'm really passionate about this, because I just see so much confusion for kids. You'll have people talking about, it's your right to say no, and no means no. And I couldn't agree with you more, but so stop sexualizing kids when they're 3, 4, 5 years old. Because what you're doing is you're creating in their mind the idea that sex is normal, and that if it feels good, you should try it. And then we have this issue of consent. It's like, but say yes before you do it, so that you can't cry foul.
The pre-programming.
It is
to normalize it
right
at such a young age.
Right.
When you think of, even, shall I say, some of the dolls that are created for little girls.
Yep.
They look at that, and that there's an idea in their mind planted at a very young age. I need to look like that,
right,
in order for me to be wanted, valued, or otherwise.
Right.
Again, these are little girls, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old,
Yep.
looking at these objects. Little boys seeing what is being popularized
Right.
in the same way.
Yep.
I remember as a little girl, again, if we go back to last week, thinking about She-Ra. She was beautiful.
Yeah.
But there were ways that she was made to be beautiful that to a little girl would misconstrue what I should be seeing in my mind versus what I was seeing.
Yep.
And again, I think that all goes back to consent, because
You didn't consent to that.
I did not.
And neither did I.
Yep.
But we are being told to consent.
Correct.
We are being told to do what you're doing to get through the situation.
Correct.
And it is so confusing, which is why we gotta break through this and move forward and use the word the way that it was designed to be used, as a form of protection, as a form of truth, and as a place where we can stand. So, the other thing that I am going to add to the conversation about the issue of pre-programming is, where does addiction fall into that? Like, think about that. People do not realize that what is happening to our kids, it's all our brain, it's all our heart related. And so then what does it do? It actually literally causes an addiction.
Yeah.
I had a question asked to me in a large audience. So if this story sounds familiar to you, I promise it's not yours. But somebody asked me, is it possible for a 5-year-old to be addicted to pornography? And I said, yes, it is. And they're like, okay. They were relieved. And I'm like, what's going on in your world for you to ask me that question? I had the same experience with a family member, and I'm not going to go into that. But the whole thing was, their 5-year-old was playing a kid's game on their little iPad where they thought they had everything set up to protect it. But a little image popped up that looked like another kid thing. And the child clicked on it, and mom and dad didn't realize that the child had been watching pornography for the last hour. And so ever since that situation, that little child tries to grab the iPad whenever she can. She tries to, go into the closet and watch. And unfortunately, because she can't type yet, she's not old enough to type and spell, she knows how to use the microphone.
Oh, no.
So she just says a phrase and then up pops very disturbing pornography for this little girl.
That breaks my heart.
It breaks my heart too, because the average age where our kids are using a smart device is 6. Okay? They are not consenting to this. They are not looking for it. The problem is that we are not aware of how intentional our country is on sexualizing our kids. And here's my thought about it. Is it's like everybody talks about our own sexuality as a moral, they get it all jumbled with this moral issue. Let's just talk about the truth. Here's what we know. Do you remember when the tobacco industry got into a lot of trouble because they found that they were intentionally targeting children? Mm-hmm. So why were they targeting children?
Because they're so easily coerced.
They're very easily coerced, and their brain is primed for addiction.
Correct.
So if you want a user for life, you get them when they're young. Mm. And so it became a huge controversy. And everybody went after big tobacco. Like, you don't mess with our kids. What if we did this now in what's happening with how much exposure our kids are having to all of this confusion and sexual conversation, to where now our sexual predators are younger and younger and younger? It is absolutely devastating. And here's the deal. Children mimic what they see.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Exactly. Right. And so people, I'm just trying to empower you. Your kids are not asking for this. They are not consenting to this, but they are being stuck and pulled into the situation to where this is what they are experiencing and this is what they know. And I'm living proof of that. You're living proof of that when it comes to what is it going to take to survive the situation. How does a child, you know what the most fun thing about this whole conversation is, though? Is our brains are plastic. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is that we can create new brain pathways, because once there's an addiction formed, it's literally because there's a pathway that's been in your brain connected to where you stick on. It's like that easy road that you go down every time. Well, for this little 5-year-old, here's what the family needs to do. And it takes commitment, because this is not a 5-year-old issue. This is a family issue now. And I always say, just imagine that you found out that your 5-year-old has this form of cancer, but in 90 days, we can cure that cancer. Would you not do whatever it took to cure the cancer so that she survived in 90 days?
We would all do it.
Exactly.
Each and every one of us. There wouldn't be a question.
Right. So here's what it looks like if you want to retrain your child's brain, or even retrain your own brain, mm-hmm. is you get all the screens out of the house. And I don't even mean just like putting it in the closet, because if you think about it, because there's an addiction here. There's an addiction now.
It's the same thing you would do if it was alcoholism.
Exactly.
You remove the thing, the
Yep.
stimulus,
Yep.
the reason. You remove it from your place. People are so addicted,
Yeah.
to use the word,
Yeah.
to our screens, whether it's our phones, our TV
Right.
shows, our laptops, whatever
Right.
the case may be. But you're right.
Yeah.
Remove it.
Remove it. And the reason that you do want to get it off the property is because your brain is so stinking smart that it knows that whatever it is locked up in that door, locked up in that, and it doesn't help the brain retrain itself to get back on the path to freedom. Now, here's the other thing, is what I'm not saying is you have to have no screens for the rest of your life. What I am saying is after 90 days, you've developed a new brain pathway, and you can reintroduce screens to maybe being on for an hour or two, like setting time limits, instead of it just being this kind of free-for-all. Mm-hmm. So you can reintroduce things, or you can just say, forget it, because I've just heard too many stories of kids that, are being abused on their little iPads while they're innocently watching something. Mm-hmm. And somebody throws something in there that they didn't consent to, but now it has a complete impact on their whole heart, mind, and everything else. So
we remove 90 days. Mm-hmm. Then what?
Then you can reintroduce it however you feel necessary. I would definitely never have their like, for a little, in their own bedroom. Mm-hmm. Keep it out in the open to where everybody's there. And in those 90 days, what you're encouraging is conversation. Because who we're mad at right now is the predator, not the child.
Not the baby.
And it's like, honey, I am so sad that that person did that to you, that they showed you those pictures that hurt you. And you know what? If your body felt a certain way, your body was exactly doing what it was told to do. Your body was designed to do that. There's nothing wrong with you. Do not be ashamed about that. From now on, we want to talk about those body parts. We want to talk about what we see. We want to talk about what we think about, because the more we talk about it, the less power it has on our mind.
I love that.
We are all together in this conversation, and it's really true, and it's really simple. And we're going to screw up. I'll never forget watching an old movie that I hadn't seen in forever, and my son was old enough where I was like, ooh, let's watch Lethal Weapon, and I hadn't seen it in so long. And the first scene, there's a boob, and I'm like, boob! And Skylar, no, it was my youngest, Will, and was like, way to go, Mom. And I'm like, yeah,
sorry, buddy.
There's boob. And we just moved past it. We didn't make the boob the big issue. I didn't freak out and go, I'm throwing away the TV and we're never watching movies. It's just like, it doesn't have to have the power over us.
Just acknowledge it and move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, although the topic was very heavy and very deep today, the light at the end of the tunnel is this. If we find that there's a problem, we remove it immediately from our home and from our lives. We do this for a minimum of 90 days to recreate those paths in our brains. And during that time, we talk about our feelings. We talk about our experiences. We make sure that that little or that middle or that older one understands that everything they felt and they experienced is biological and normal. And we're going to talk about what is appropriate for their age and how to move forward from it. And then when those 90 days are up, because here's the light, you reintroduce with safety and with precaution.
Right.
As a family, as a unit, you do it all together. Did I capture that all right?
You sure did.
Okay.
Yep, that's beautiful. Way to wrap it up with the big bow, because here's the beautiful thing. Look at what it's going to do to the relationships. It's going to restore, because those traumatic experiences, the result of trauma is disconnect. So you are reconnecting. Your relationships are becoming stronger. Your communication and your dialogue is opening back up, and you become the trusted person that your child needs you to be, right? I love that. That is where the hope lies. It's just, we are so wrapped up in all of the negative that, man, let's move forward. Let's think forward. Let's be hopeful that all it takes is standing on the truth that a word was supposed to be as a protective measure. Most of the stuff that happens to our kids, they did not consent to that, but they don't know what to do with what happened. We have to be the ones who can help them. And if you're somebody who is just now realizing, oh my gosh, that's me, and I can see now why I respond or react the way that I do, because it's my survival technique. Well, God bless you for that, right? It's like, that is your survival technique. But now what you want to do is not let your emotional brain, your survival brain be what takes over. Use your prefrontal cortex, recognize what you're feeling, and then say, okay, I'm not in the same situation. It's bringing up a feeling for me, but I can consent to whether or not I'm going to let this emotion take me down that path that I don't want to go.
If I might add as well, something that we didn't really touch very deeply at all on today is the understanding that addiction is a disease. You used cancer earlier, which is a great example. Cancer isn't something we would be angry at.
Right.
Cancer is something we treat. Addiction is something we treat. And so, again, through the steps that we've shared with you, we can continue to treat a disease and mitigate the risk of the disease on our littles, our mediums, and our older ones. I want to stress this especially because so many people get angry with addiction. And quite frankly, a disease is a disease. You cannot wrap your arms around it, tie it in a bow, and throw it out. You just can't. And so to just acknowledge that there are ways to treat diseases in the way that we would any disease that our family members would have. This is the same case.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times addiction is a result of abuse.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's a vicious cycle, but if we go all the way back to it, it's all about caring for one another the way that we're supposed to care for each other. And then when we find out that somebody that we love has been hurt, we come alongside them, we join their team, and we step up and we move forward.
Remove, eliminate, talk, recover. as a family.
Yeah.
And that, my friends, is what we give you on Forward Thinking Friday.
All right. I think we nailed it today.
Amen.
All right. Well, everybody, this is a wrap up for season 2, and I'm excited for season 3. And we'll keep you posted. So thanks for everything.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.